Good day, everyone. Welcome to the second part of the lecture for Module 6, Declaration of Principles and State Policies. Today, I will be discussing Article 2 of the Philippine 1987 Constitution. Article 2 is divided into two. Declaration of Principles, which can be found from sections 1 to 6, and State Policies from section 7 up to section 28. Yes, there are 28 sections under this article. Okay, so let us begin with section 1. Section 1 states that the Philippines is a democratic and republican state. Sovereignty resides in the people and all government authority emanates from them. This provision is a restatement of the democratic character of our government. What do we mean by democracy and republicanism? A republican government is a democratic government by representatives chosen by the people at large. The essence, therefore, is of a republican state is indirect rule. What do we mean by this? The people have established the government to govern themselves. Its officers from the highest to the lowest are servants of the people and not their masters. They can only exercise the powers delegated to them by the people who remain as the ultimate source of political power and authority. Section 1 adds that the democratic word is a government, while essentially a republican democracy embodies some features of a pure democracy or direct democracy, such as initiative, referendum, and recall. What are the manifestations of a democratic and republican state? First is the existence of a Bill of Rights. Second, the observance of the rule of the majority. Third, the observance of the principle that ours is a government of laws and not of men. Fourth, the presence of elections through popular will. Fifth, the observance of the principle of separation of powers and systems of checks and balances. Sixth, the observance of the principle that the legislature cannot pass irrepealable laws. Seventh, the observance of the law on public officers. Eighth, the observance of the principle that the state cannot be sued without its consent. Now, what do we mean by sovereignty of the people, which is stated in the second sentence of this provision? Sovereignty of the people or sovereignty implies that the supreme authority to govern lies on the people. The Filipino people have the right to constitute their own government, to change it, to define its jurisdiction and powers. So it can be exercised through different ways. First is the popular sovereignty. What do we mean by popular sovereignty? It is the ultimate power of the government that rests on the people through suffrage. This further implies that the people have the right to establish their own. Second, popular consent. It is an idea of a just government which derives its powers from the consent of the people. Now again, when we say democracy, it is a political ideology, and at the same time, republicanism is the form of government which manifests that the government is a government of the people. Next, Section 2. Section 2 states that the Philippines renounces war as an instrument of national policy, adopts the generally accepted principles of international law as part of the law of the land, and adheres to the policy of peace, equality, justice, freedom, cooperation, and amity with all nations. There are three concepts that we can regard in this provision. First is the renunciation of war. This first aspect of this provision is in accordance with the principle of the United Nations binding all members to refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The declaration only refers to the renunciation by the Philippines of aggressive war, not war in defense of her national honor and integrity. So basically, we are a defensive country, whereas we do not adhere, okay, waging war against other country. Now, let's also discuss international law. What do we mean by international law? It refers to the body of rules and principles which governs the relations of nations and their respective peoples in their intercourse with one another. This portion binds the Philippines to enforce or observe within its jurisdiction generally accepted principles of international law, whether customary or by treaty provision as part of the law of the land. Here, an automatic adoption of international law as part of the law of the land under what is known as the doctrine of incorporation. There are three things that we can consider in this part of this section. First, when international usage to be applied. So international law is to be used as customs of civilized nations, which give effect by our or which can be given effect by our courts in the absence of any treaty, executive order, legislative act, or judicial decision. Second, a treaty has force of a statute. The Constitution gives a treaty the same weight and the value as a statute of Congress in the case of a conflict between a treaty and a statute. The prior act is superseded by the latter one in point of time. When a treaty is superseded by a subsequent statute of Congress, the treaty is repealed or abrogated as part of the law of the land, but it still subsists as an engagement of the Philippines, although it may not be enforceable by our courts. The other state may only present its complaint to the political organs, just like the President or the Congress. Again, in this part of this provision, basically it gives the idea that we are to give effect to international law, just like how we are giving effect to the statutes or the laws being passed by the Congress. However, when it comes to the conflict that might arise between the provisions of the international law and the Constitution will always prevail because of the fact that we consider the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. Next is the adherence of the Philippines to the policy of peace, justice, equality among all nations. This third aspect of this provision is the foregoing portions of this declaration. It shows a positive attitude on the part of the Philippines towards the observance of the principles of the United Nations and to universally accepted rules and principles of international law. In line with the objectives of the United Nations, the Philippines seeks only peace and friendship with her neighbors and all countries of the world, regardless of race, creed, ideology, and political system, on the basis of mutual trust, respect, and cooperation. It supports the idea that all nations has the right, big and small, to equality, freedom, justice in their relations with one another, and the policy of non-interference and peaceful settlement of international disputes and opposes the use of force or the threat of force in the relations among other nations. That is Section 2. Again, the Philippines renounces war. The Philippines also adopts internationally or international laws. And the third is the adherence of the Philippines to justice, peace, equality among all nations. Let us proceed with Section 3. Section 3 provides civilian authority is at all times supreme over the military. The armed forces of the Philippines is a protector of the people and the state. Its goal is to secure the sovereignty of the state and the integrity of the national territory. Under this provision, the highest of such authority being the president over the military has always been recognized in our jurisdiction by implication from express provisions of the 1935 Constitution and by practice a safeguard against military dictatorship. Okay, so we appoint the president, okay, as a civilian to be supreme than the armed forces of the Philippines. The armed forces of the Philippines is the protector of the people, and hence they are to they are mandated to they are mandated by the Constitution to basically protect the people and the state, to secure the sovereignty of the state and the might or the integrity of the national territory. This means that fighting all forces, international or external, which seek to overthrow the government, impair the independence of the nation, or dismember any portion of its territory. The AFP also serves as a support to people. This constitutional mandates refers to the idea that the AFP should win the hearts and minds of the people in the efforts to resolve the long-drawn insurgency problem and fulfill its crucial task as an effective guardian of the nation's safety against any threat to its existence, whether from within or from without. The strength of the armed forces, indeed, of our nation stems from the people. Another concept that we can have in here is again the idea that the AFP is following the orders of the president. Let us move forward with section 14. Section 4 rather. Section 4 states that the prime duty of the government is to serve and protect the people. The government may call upon the people to defend the state, and in the fulfillment thereof, all citizens may be required under conditions provided by law to render service or personal, military, or civil service. The prime duty of the government. According to Abraham Lincoln, democracy is a government of the people, which refers to the idea that the government exists for the people and not the people for their government. Serving the people implies that government should consider at all times the welfare of the people in all their programs. While the prime duty of the government is no longer of the government or for the people, it may call upon the people to defend the state. So as we put the prime duty of the government in protecting the people, okay, and now we have also the second concept under this provision, which is the people defending their own state. So basically, we can see the inculcation of the different trainings that we are having in this provision. From elementary, we are having the Boy Scout, okay, and for secondary, we have the CAT, and for the tertiary level, we have the NSTP or the ROTC, as they may call it. Again, since the prime duty of the government is to serve and protect the people. Now, if they're in times of war, the people should also protect its state from, okay, the threat of international law, okay, or international violence. Now let us also refer to section 5. Section 5 states that the maintenance of peace and order, the protection of life, liberty, and property, and the promotion of the general welfare are essential for the enjoyment by all the people of the blessings of democracy. In here, the state, again, shall establish and maintain one police force which shall be national in scope and civilian in character, to be administered and controlled by a national government. Section 5 specifies what the government has to do in ensuring people's enjoyments of the blessings of democracy. Okay? So, such as the protection of life, liberty, and property, and as well as the promotion of general welfare or the common good. Moving forward to Section 6. Section 6 states that the separation of the church and the state shall be inviolable. There are different concepts that we can have in this provision. The separation of the church and the state refers to not or the church that should not interfere in the purely political matters and the state in purely matters of religions and morals. The state is prohibited by the Constitution from passing a law respecting the establishment of religion. That is the reason why you have the freedom to also choose your own religion. Not unlike other country that they have one or they have a state religion, which is, let's say, for example, Islam or other Middle Eastern countries. Now, also, it avoid the evils associated with the establishment of unofficial religion, namely government sponsorship of religion, like the government should not procure any budgets for the government, for the church, any sect, denomination, church, because again, it would, it would result to the church intervening to the matters of the church or to the state intervening to the matters of the church. Um, with regards to this, it declares free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination or preference, which shall forever be allowed. The government has no authority to compel the people to accept any creed or deny them any right because of their beliefs or lack of them. Okay? So, again, under this provision, there is a demarcation line. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Let's move forward to Section 7, which is the start of state policies. Section 7 states that the state shall pursue an independent foreign policy. In its relations with other states, the paramount consideration shall be national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination. Let us define first what is foreign policy. Foreign policy refers to the courses of an action and decision a state undertakes in its external relations so as to attain and advance national objectives and national interests. It requires the government to pursue independent foreign policy which is not dictated and imposed upon it by another state. Basic thrust of Philippine foreign policy is twofold. First is the establishment of friendly relations with both democratic and communist countries. Second, the promotion of beneficial economic and trading relations with all countries. Following considerations, basically, as we mentioned a while ago, there is a paramount consideration. So what are these considerations? First is the national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the right to self-determination. Okay, so this provision is actually related to the second or to section 8, which is again um, the freedom from nuclear weapons. So basically, under foreign policy, we are to have a friendly relationship to other people. So as for us to invite investors coming from other country, but it should not also supersede to other countries dictating us from what to do, because again it would violate the sovereignty or the independence of the country from doing its relations to other country. So as we may notice, the country had a dynamic or basically nagkaroon ng shift with regards to the allies or to whom the Philippines is having a friendly relation. In the past, the Philippines had been so acquainted to the Western countries. But when the president when the present president had the position of being yeah, the highest in the country, be President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, we had noticed that again nagkaroon ng shift, okay, from having a friendly relationship to democratic countries to communist countries. Now let us proceed to section 8. Section 8 that states that the Philippines, consistent with the national interest, adopts and pursues a policy of freedom from nuclear weapons in its territory. What is the aim of this provision? It is to forbid the making, storing, manufacture of or testing in our country of nuclear weapons, devices, or parts thereof, as well as the use of our territory as dumping site for the radioactive waste and the transit within our territory of ships or planes with nuclear weapons. It does not, however, prohibit the use of nuclear energy for medicine, agriculture, and other peaceful or beneficial purposes. Congress will have to provide the mechanics to effectively implement Section 8 of Article 2. So we also ban the nuclear weapons as subject to exemption. The records of the Constitutional Commission support the position that Section 8 does not absolutely ban nuclear weapons from Philippine territory. The phrase consistent with the national interest may reasonably be interpreted to mean subject to national interest. In other words, if the national interest so dictates, the strong of nuclear the storing of nuclear weapons in our territory may be permitted at least on a transitory basis, considering that it was not prohibited under the then existing military bases agreement with the United States, whose validity and term of effectivity until 1991 are implicitly recognized by the Constitution. Now let's move forward to Section 9. Section 9 refers to or Section 9 states that the state shall promote a just and dynamic social order that will ensure the prosperity and independence of the nation and free the people from poverty through policies that provide adequate social services, promote full employment, a rising standard of living, and an improved quality of life for all. So let us begin with the concept of a just and dynamic social order. Section 9 provides or often is often disregarded by government officials whose motivations in the service of is personal gain and aggrandizement, or aggrandizement rather. The Constitution requires government officials to ensure the promotion of a just and dynamic social order for the purpose of ensuring prosperity and independence of the Filipino nation, and at the same time liberating the people from poverty. Freeing the people from the pangs of poverty, however, requires that the government undertake seriously the following tasks. First, provision of adequate social services. Second, promotion of full employment. Third, raising of people's living standards. And last would be improvement of the quality of life for all. The state solves mass poverty and social problems that comes with it, social unrest, breakdown of family systems, diseases, ignorance, criminality, and low productivity. Let us move forward to Section 10. Section 10 states that the state shall promote social justice in all phases of national development. This section provides that the government is mandated to regulate the acquisition, ownership, use, and disposition of property and its increment. Moreover, the proportion or promotion of social justice requires that the government be committed to create economic opportunities based on freedom of initiative and self-reliance for the welfare of everybody. The humanization of laws and equalization of social economic and forces by the state, so that justice and in its national and objectively in secular conception may at least be appropriated. The state must give preferential attention to the welfare of the less fortunate members of the community, the poor, the unschooled, the disabled, as well as the underprivileged, those who have less in life. Moving forward, Section 11. Section 11 states that the state values the dignity of every human person and guarantees full respect for human rights. This section provides that the government is morally obligated to safeguard the inherent rights of the people. Non-recognition of these rights in a society destroys the very essence of a democracy as a whole of life. What do we mean by human being and human rights? Human dignity or human dignity and human rights, a human person is a being and not a thing. He is entitled to respect not because he is right or wrong, but because he is human. In a democratic state, the individual enjoys the rights which cannot be modified or taken away by the lawmaking body. These rights are protected or guaranteed worth of every human person, regardless of race, color, creed, origin, or station of life. Implied in this principle or policy is the recognition that the human person is the end and purpose of social or every social organization, the state included. The value accorded to the human dignity is measured by the extent of respect for human rights. Principally, the right to life includes security, liberty, and property. In pursuit of this constitutional policy, it is the duty of the state to enact measures and develop programs that will promote human dignity and safeguard the rights of the people from any threat or violence or use of force, deception, or any extra legal means for the purpose of exploitation or in the pursuit of wicked ends. A person's human rights is not only a moral obligation, but so imperative if we are to live peacefully in today's world where interests are diverse and conflicting. Let's proceed with Section 12. Section 12, the state recognizes the sanctity of family life and shall protect and strengthen the family as a basic autonomous social institution. It shall equally protect the life of the mother and the life of the unborn from conception. The natural and primary right and duty of parents in the rearing of the youth for civic efficiency and the development of moral character shall receive the support of the government. In this provision, there are three things that we have to consider. First is the strengthening of the family as a basic social institution. Second, the right of the right to life of the unborn from conception and of the mother. The third one is rearing of the youth for civic efficiency and development of moral character. Basically, in this provision, we may notice that the state has to recognize the sacredness of the family life. This means that it cannot enact statutes that shall redound to the destruction of the family life. In the fulfillment of this policy, the government has the duty to undertake this task. Okay, and also we have the family code, okay, of the Philippines, which has a clear indication of the government government's recognition on the sanctity of the family. And also, we have the Civil Code of the Philippines, which lays down certain general principles which sustain the solidarity of the family, not only for the guidance of the courts and administrative officials, but also for their wholesome influence upon members of every family. Basically, again, the state cannot pass any laws that shall redound to the destruction of the family life. The state cannot dictate as to how they are going, how should parents rear their child. And also, okay, from the concept of abortion, with the second part of this provision, basically we do not adhere abortion because this may be called as, or this will be called as unconstitutional, as section 12 states that we are protecting the life of the unborn child as well as the mother. However, if, say for example, the life of the mother is at stake, then that may not be called as an abortion. Let's proceed to section 13. Section 13 states that the state recognizes the vital role of the youth in nation building and shall promote and protect their physical, moral, spiritual, intellectual, and social well being. It shall inculcate in the youth patriotism and nationalism and encourage their involvement in civic and public affairs. So, what is the role of the youth in nation building? Basically, in this provision, the state recognizes that the youth of today are aware, okay, are more aware of their environment than the past. And it can be accounted for by that the reality that today's youth okay, are into technologies which makes them aware of what is happening. In the fulfillment of this provision, voting age was lowered from 21 to 18 years old. That is, again, for us to recognize their role in nation building. As they would say in quotation, today's youth, tomorrow's leaders. So, how are we going to manifest this in the state? That is to harness the enterprising spirit and progressive idealism of young people that can become effective players in our collective effort to build a modern Philippines, and properly trained and guided will in time assume with dignity and honor the places of their elders in high councils of the nation. Our youth are the most valuable resource and asset. On their shoulders rests the success of all efforts to build our nation into a strong republic. As Jose Rizal would put it, ang kabataan ang pag-asa ng bayan. Moving forward to Section 14. Section 14, the state recognizes the role of women in nation building and shall ensure the fundamental equality before the law of women and men. The role of women in nation building can be accounted for by the reality that women are greater in number, and so they constitute a potent political and economic force in our society. The state is mandated to ensure equality of men and women before the law and to promote equality of access of employment between them. So again, not only to that, but also to all opportunities that should be available to both men and women, such as education, economic opportunity, political empowerment, and as well as health. Moving forward to Section 15. Section 15 states that the state shall protect and promote the right to health of the people and instill health consciousness among them, or health consciousness among them. the state is mandated to undertake the following. First, the adaptation of an integrated and a comprehensive approach to health development to make essential health and other social services available to the people at an affordable cost. Basically, the establishment and maintenance of an effective food and drug regulatory system. We have also the undertaking appropriate health and manpower development and research. That's why, again, when it comes to the COVID-19 response, okay, the state is mandated to advance its effort to that. Establishment of a special agency for disabled person for their rehabilitation, self-development, self-reliance, and integration into the mainstream of society. So also, medical services should be made available throughout the country. And also, the state has the duty to integrate the comprehensive approach to health development and agency for disabled person. Let's go to section 16. Section 16 emphasizes or states that the state shall protect and advance the right of the people to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature. In here, it is the government or the government is expected to undertake programs in ensuring a clean and pollution-free environment to protect life and health. Okay, so we have actually DNR that carries this policy. Okay, that is mandated by the Constitution. But of course, with regards to the issue of Manila Bay, okay, it boils or stir confusion as well as a lot of issues because instead of allotting budget for um, a more helpful ecology, okay, ayun, yun yung ano, kumbaga naging focus. Alright, so section 17. Section 17 states that the state shall give priority to education, science and technology, arts, culture, and sports to foster patriotism and nationalism, accelerate social progress, and promote total human liberation and development. So under this provision, the state shall protect and promote the right of all citizens to equality or to quality education at all levels. So all levels, hindi lang sa elementary, okay, but all levels, and shall undertake, okay, appropriate steps to make such education accessible to all. Section 18. Section 18 states that the state affirms labor as a primary social economic force. It shall protect the rights of workers and promote their welfare. Under this provision, the state shall undertake the following. First, the full protection of local and overseas labor. That is why we have DOLE and OWA as an organization that shall protect the rights of those workers abroad and workers in the country. Another is the promotion of full employment and equal employment opportunities. Whatever position you have, okay, again, everyone is entitled to equal opportunities as long as they meet requirements being asked by the company. Another is guaranteeing the full enjoyment of the rights of the workers, right to self-organization, right to collective bargaining, right to collective negotiations. So basically in here, we have also, when we say right to organization, the workers can also form what we call unions for them to have an collective negotiations with the company they are in. Another is again the collective negotiations. This entails the different benefits that an employee might have. Promotion of shared responsibility between workers and employers, and the preferential use of modes in settling disputes. So how does a certain company settle its disputes? So we have actually uh, yeah, the different lawyers that are present in the company. But if they don't, again, they can go to DOLE or NLRC as a government body that can try to meddle with the disputes of those employees. Okay, and now let's move forward to section 19. Section 19, the state shall develop a self-reliant and independent national economy effectively controlled by um, Filipinos. Section 19 states that the constitutional guidelines in the development of the economy, economic reliance, independent national economy, and effective control of the Filipino people, okay, states that our we have to have the Filipino people as the ones managing, okay, the economy of the country. Okay. Next is the recognition of the private sector in of the economy or in the economy. So this has been stated in section 20. Section 20 is read as the state recognizes the indispensable role of the private sector, encourages private enterprise, and provides incentives to needed investments. What do we mean by this? Let us define this. The Constitution forbids an economy where the state shall be the competing force with private enterprises. This is primarily due to the fact that the primary concern of the government is not to engage in, okay, businesses reaping huge profits, but in managing the affairs of the state. So again, the government is not established for business, but rather it is established for the people. The state provides incentives to local foreign investments. With this, we can have the role of the private sector in building the economy of the country. Moving forward to section 21. Section 21, the state shall promote comprehensive rural development and agrarian reform. Comprehensive rural development and agrarian reform covers all phases of rural development under economic, social, political, and cultural, or and even industrial. Basically, in this provision, we should have programs that has to be based on the right of the farmer and regular farm workers who are landless to own their directly or collectively the lands they till, or in the case of other farm workers, to receive a just share of the fruits like yung mga ani nila. Okay? The state is obligated to provide support to agriculture through appropriate the technology and research. So adequate financial production, marketing, and other support services to farmers. So just like yung issue kay Cynthia Villar, ano? Okay, we are of course mad at Cynthia Villar because or Senator Cynthia Villar because of the fact that she is not supporting the plight of the farmers. Okay? Section 22. Section 22. The state recognizes and promotes the rights of indigenous cultural communities within the framework of national unity and development. Under this provision, we can uh, come up with the inclusion of the numerous cultural communities in the different parts of the country. Thus, the state is mandated to safeguard their rights and has to consider the culture and interest of these non-dominant groups in conceptualizing and implementing programs and projects for their benefit and welfare. In fact, the Congress shall pass laws that promotes their rights. Actually, we have it's now IP month, okay, October, in the month of October. So, with regards to that, okay, they should not abolish the culture, the practices that they are having, because again, that had been the practices ever since, even before the government existed. Section 23. Section 23, the state shall encourage non-governmental community-based or sectoral organizations that promote the welfare of the nation. Non-governmental, community-based, or sectoral organizations, the state is required to encourage these organizations because recent events have shown that under responsible leadership, they can be active contributors to the political, social, and economic growth of the country. It should refrain from any actuation that would tend to interfere or subvert the rights of these organizations, which, in the words of the Constitution, are community-based or sectoral organizations that promote the welfare of the nation. Okay? So, Section 24. Section 24, the state recognizes the vital role of communication and information in nation building. The vital role of communication and information in nation building. Communication and information as used in this provision include not only the print or broadcast media, but also, okay, the social media that we are having right now. Those means of communication designed to gather and convey news or information to the public are called mass media because they reach the mass of the people. That they play a critical role in nation building, which is very obvious. Through this media, message and ideas are exchanged and recorded. The newest version of the private or for private communication is, of course, cell phone, okay, with the plight of the different social media apps. Formation of an enlightened citizenry. Okay, so with regards to recognition of the role of mass media, it enlightens the citizenry. Mass media shape people's thoughts and beliefs, their attitudes and values. In a country like the Philippines, composed of people diverse cultures, they can be an effective instrument in promoting national integrity and preserving Filipino values and traditions by educating the citizenry on important public issues. They also help create a strong, vigilant, and enlightened public opinion so essential to the successful operation of a republican democracy. Mass media also promote positive values that can propel, can propel a nation to grow and progress. So, however, as we can see, media is also being politicized. It is now being used for them to um, uplift one color to the other. So, with regards to this, of course, in today's situation, we have to be very careful of the fake news or of fake news that even big companies in mass media or in biggest network companies in the Philippines are also being politicized. Okay, and that should not be the case. Okay, now next is the state shall ensure the autonomy of the local governments, the local government unit. So with this, we have RA or Republic Act 7160, or otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, okay, which of course we are using Pimentel's version 1994, which considers as the fundamental charter of our country that mandates the state to ensure local government units that serve as a conduits of the national government in the performance of its varied tasks and functions. With local affairs under local executives, the national government can devote its time and effort in addressing national issues and concern. So that is why we have here the president of the Philippines is under the different local governments. Next, Section 26. The state shall guarantee equal access to opportunities for public service and prohibit political dynasties as may be defined by law. Equal access to opportunities. Basically, there is a limitation to the terms of office of those elective officials, like the president, vice president, senators, representatives, and local officials. This enhances equal access to political opportunities, although they may not completely do away with the evils spawned by political dynasties that proliferated in the country in the past. With these political and economic resources, an elective official can have a close kin or trusted follower run by for the same position and continue to exercise control through the latter and then be a candidate again for the same position in the next or succeeding elections. Hence, the need for a declaration expressly prohibiting political dynasties. Okay, so again, in this, even though we have a limit to term office, political dynasty is still prevalent in our country. Section 27. Section 27 provides that the state shall maintain honesty and integrity in the public service and take positive and effective measures against graft and corruption. Honesty and integrity in public service. The perennial problem of graft and corruption. Corruption undermines the equality of life or the quality of life for people, especially in poor countries. It is the arch enemy of development and good government. In the Philippines, every new administration since the post-war period has made a pledge to eradicate graft and corruption in government. The fact is that corruption is not the monopoly of any one administration. It has been with us for generations. The popular perception, however, is that the baneful ill has become more rampant and sophisticated through years. To be sure, the above provision was incorporated in the Constitution because of revelations of unprecedented magnitude of graft and corruption allegedly perpetrated by officials in the highest circle of the government during previous regime and as well as in this regime or administration. We have seen PhilHealth, okay, and other even non-governmental organizations are also into equipped in corrupting, okay, from the people's money. Okay, and Section 28. Section 28, subject to reasonable conditions prescribed by law, the state adopts and implements a policy of full public disclosure of all its transactions involving public service or interest. It is first, when we say full disclosure by the state of all its transaction, it is its duty to disclose it because as according to Section 7 of the Bill of Rights, it guarantees the people's right of information on matters of public concern and access to records pertaining to official transactions of the government. On the other hand, Section 28 requires the state to make public its transactions without demand from individual citizens. It stresses the duty of the state to release the information. However, not all transactions are covered, like the confidential matters regarding national security. It cannot be disclosed to the people. So that is all for Article 2 of the Philippine 1987 Constitution. From Section 1 to Section 6 are the declaration of policies or principles rather, and Section 7 up to Section 28 are the state policies. It covers all matters pertaining to the relationship of man to the other people in the society and man to the government. That ends my presentation. Thank you.